There is a liquid more expensive than vintage champagne, more expensive than black truffle oil, more expensive as of 2010 than a pint of human blood. It's in your desk drawer right now, probably running low. Printer ink. A 2010 analysis of 33 inkjet cartridges found they averaged more than $45 per ounce, against $17 per ounce for blood processing costs that same year. The numbers are dated, the situation is not. And the reason it costs that much has nothing to do with how hard it is to make. It has everything to do with a business model, one the printer industry didn't invent, runs better than anyone, and would very much prefer you not think about.
By the end of this, you'll know exactly what you're actually buying when you buy a printer. Spoiler, it's not the printer. HP's printing segment, hardware, ink, services, all of it, generated $17.3 billion in fiscal year 2024. Of that, supplies, meaning ink and toner cartridges, accounted for roughly $11.3 billion. That's 65% of the entire printing business, from the consumable, not the thing you actually bought. And the margin on that printing business, the profit after costs, ran about 19% in fiscal year 2024. Compare that to the margin on their personal computers, around 6%. Ink is roughly 3 times as profitable as selling you a laptop.
Here's the part that doesn't add up. Ink is not rare. Ink is not space age. So why does a cartridge the size of a lipstick cost more than a bottle of wine? One cartridge, a journalist priced in 2010, a $30 HP No. 45 black ink cartridge containing 42 milliliters of ink. That works out to about 71 cents per milliliter for black office ink. And here's the stranger part. Most printer manufacturers don't tell you how much ink is actually in a cartridge. Of the major manufacturers, only HP and Canon list the weight of what's inside. You're buying a product where the seller has decided you don't need to know the quantity. Run the math anyway, and it holds. Over the life of a typical consumer inkjet printer, most buyers spend far more on ink than on the hardware itself. The printer is basically an upfront fee to enter a very small, very expensive shop.
The strategy has a name. It's called razor and blades. Sell the platform cheap, extract profit from the consumable. The idea, invest in giving someone an entry point, the handle, the printer, the console, and then sell the only thing that makes it work. For printer companies, the mechanism has 3 parts. First, sell the hardware at or below cost. Second, put a microchip in every cartridge. That chip communicates with the printer. The printer will only accept a cartridge it recognizes, meaning one with an approved chip. Third, control who is allowed to make an approved chip. HP calls this system dynamic security. Their official policy states that their printers are, quote, designed to work with original HP ink and toner cartridges, and that any cartridge using a non-HP chip will be blocked.
And here is the part that most people don't realize. The block isn't baked in at the factory. HP can change it later. Firmware updates delivered silently over the internet, without asking you, can disable third-party cartridges that worked fine the day before. A cartridge you already paid for, working in a printer you already own. Gone. The analogy that maps it cleanly, a razor and blades printer is like a free-to-play mobile game. The download is free, but everything required to keep playing costs money in a store only the developer controls. And the developer can change the rules after you're in.
The razor and blades myth starts with King Gillette, a traveling salesman who in November 1904 received U.S. patents 775134 and 775135, covering razors, thin double-edged blades, and the combination. The story everyone knows, Gillette invented the razor and blades model by selling cheap handles to lock customers into buying blades. It's taught in business schools. It's used in MBA case studies. It's also historically wrong. At launch in 1904, the Gillette razor was not cheap. It sold for $5,
which, using the 1900 industrial wage as a benchmark, amounted to roughly one-third of a factory worker's weekly earnings. Gillette's patent application from the same year even stated the goal directly: thin blades so cheap the buyer could, quote, throw them away when dull. The idea was there, but Gillette wasn't running the cheap handle playbook yet.
Gillette only switched to cheap handle pricing in 1921, after the patents expired. And even then, they didn't do it as a strategy. They did it to match competitors who were already selling cheap handles. The legend of the deliberate razor and blades mastermind is, academically speaking, a later invention. Which means the company that actually perfected the strategy, the one running it deliberately, at scale, with microchips and firmware updates and lawyers, is not a razor company. The evidence points that way. It's a printer company. Now, to be fair, printer ink is not nothing. The print head in a modern inkjet fires thousands of droplets per second, and the chemistry behind reliable ink required genuine engineering. The steelman for the industry is real. This was not a simple product to develop, and some of the price does reflect real R&D. The question is just whether $45 per ounce still reflects that, or whether it reflects something else.
In January 2024, HP's CEO attended the World Economic Forum in Davos, and there, in public, in front of an audience, he explained the business model in one sentence: "We lose money on the hardware. We make money on the supplies." That's not a leak. That's not a whistleblower. That is the strategy, stated out loud by the person in charge at the World Economic Forum.
Now, here is where it gets better. Or worse. Depending on how much you spent on ink last year. In 2016, HP pushed a firmware update that blocked third-party ink cartridges that had been working in printers people already owned. Not new printers, printers already in homes, cartridges already purchased. The lawsuits arrived quickly. HP settled European claims covering consumers in Belgium, Italy, Spain, and Portugal for up to $1.35 million, without admitting fault. A separate U.S. class action followed, alleging HP used the firmware updates to create a monopoly and describing ink cartridge revenue as, quote, the lifeblood of its business. The lawsuit alleged that affected printers displayed a message: "This printer is intended to work only with cartridges that have a new or reused HP chip." Third-party ink, plaintiffs alleged, ran around half the price of the genuine HP equivalent. A full color set of HP cartridges was alleged to cost around $100, more in some cases than the printers they go into. HP settled the U.S. case in 2025. The settlement cost HP exactly $0. What they agreed to do was make firmware updates optional going forward, which is a very gentle outcome for pushing a silent update that rendered millions of cartridges useless. Take a bow.
So, let's settle a few things. Is ink expensive because it's hard to make? Partly. The engineering is real, and the printhead chemistry took years to develop. That's a fair point. The part that isn't fair is that the pricing long ago stopped tracking the cost of making ink and started tracking the cost of the alternative, which is switching printers entirely and starting over. Is the razor and blades model Gillette's invention? Academically, no. Gillette ran a premium hardware strategy for 17 years, from the 1904 patent to the 1921 switch, and only moved to cheap handles when competitors forced it. The myth got attached to Gillette somewhere in between.
Is this all legal? Yes, and the CEO of the company running it said so at Davos. We lose money on the hardware. We make money on the supplies. There is no suggestion that this is hidden. It is the strategy. Here is the part worth sitting with. At Davos in 2024, the same CEO also said HP actively works to, quote, reduce unprofitable customers. That term, unprofitable customers, refers specifically to buyers who use third-party ink. The person in your office trying to save $8 on a generic cartridge is the problem HP is trying to eliminate. Supplies account for 2/3 of everything HP makes from printing.
The printing division runs at nearly 3 times the margin of the computer division. The printer costs $40. The ink costs more. And the company that invented the model everyone credits to Gillette runs it better than Gillette ever did. Incredible work. Genuinely horrible for your desk budget, but incredible. The printer model locks you in with a chip and a firmware update. The hospital model doesn't need to lock you in at all. There's only one hospital, and you're not really in a position to comparison shop. And if you want to know how hospitals charge $40 for one aspirin, and how the pricing logic there is somehow even more brazen, that's the next one.